Hey guys, and welcome to the fourth video in this multi-part series on how to study words for tournament Scrabble. In this video, we'll be talking about the second through fourth rows in my table here, which will get us through all of the three-letter words as well as some of the most useful four-letter words. As a reminder, in the last video, we talked about the two-letter words and how while there's only 100 of them, they're some of the most valuable words any tournament Scrabble player can know, because they'll allow you to fit longer words on the board. It can be super frustrating if you find a bingo or otherwise long word on your rack and don't know all the two-letter words, so you're not sure if there's a place you can play it on the board. Additionally, we talked about how knowing the two-letter words will allow you to use power tiles and other high-scoring tiles to make overlap plays where you make several two-letter words at the same time while scoring a lot of points. The three-letter words aren't quite as fundamentally useful as the two-letter words in that sense, but they're still super helpful to know because once you know your two-letter words, you'll be playing a lot of those, and it'll be really useful to know what letters you can put on either side of the two-letter words. So the threes come up quite a lot, both again in terms of being able to play bingos and longer words, and also for overlap plays where you're making several twos and threes, combining your knowledge of the twos and threes at the same time to score large numbers of points. The fours are slightly less useful than the twos and the threes, so you'll see I have the remainder of the fours a little bit further down on the table, but there are a couple fours in particular that are super useful, namely the ones that have the power tiles and play off a lot of vowels that we'll be talking about in this video. And I would still study those after the threes, but I would lump them into the same general category of usefulness as they really do come up quite a lot. So as an example of some of the fun words we'll be looking at in this video, here are a few of them. Of course, some of these words are very familiar. Like on the left, I have some of the vowel dumps. So these are four-letter words that have three vowels, and they're super useful because if you have a lot of vowels on your rack, then knowing these kind of words might make the difference between being able to at least score a decent number of points, probably not a ton of points, but at least scoring like 15, maybe 20 points instead of having to exchange. So some of these, like aloe, are pretty familiar, but some of them, like unau, U-N-A-U, which is defined as a two-toed sloth, which I have pictured over here, are definitely not familiar to most English speakers, but are super, super useful in Scrabble. Now, as for some of the more obscure words involving the power tiles, so those are once again the 8 and 10 point tiles, the J, Q, X, and Z, you might see words like ZEBU, which is this very interesting looking animal over here. I'm not actually sure what it was named after. It might be a hybrid between a zebra and a bull. I'm not exactly sure, but in any case, pretty cool looking animal here. That is a ZEBU, which is a word that comes up quite often when you have the Z, and also Zax, super useful three to know. And I can't tell you how many times I've played Zax for like 60 or 70 points, and there's nothing more satisfying than doing that. And let me tell you, there's nothing worse as an opponent when you work so hard to like play a bingo or something, and then your opponent just slaps down Zax for like 75, scoring more than you even got for your bingo. So Zax, which is, I believe, defined as a slate cutting tool, which is pictured here, is a super useful three to know. So with that general background, let me now show you how I would go about creating these list of words in ZEBU and Aerolith so that I can study them. So with that in mind, let's discuss how to actually go about studying these lists of words. We'll start with the list of threes containing power tiles, which was the second row in that table. And what I'd recommend here is a process pretty much identical to the twos. So what I would do is go to ZEBU and open a search pane. And the way you're going to search for this list of words is with two conditions. One is simply an anagram match for three blanks. So this, if I hit search now, would yield all of the threes. But to narrow it down, I'm going to add a second condition and use this consists of option. And what I'm going to do is enter JQXZ in this free text field and change the first number to 1% from 0. So what this does basically is it looks for three-letter words where the set of tiles consists at least 1% of J's, Q's, X's, and Z's. So theoretically speaking, I could have actually used any number between 1 and 33, because any 3 that has at least one of these tiles will consist 33.33%, or 1/3 of the J, Q, X, and Z. But it's just easier to do 1% since it's the simplest, and you know you can do this for any length of word that you'll be studying. So here I'm going to hit search, and you'll see that this pulls up 98 three-letter words, all of which contain a J, Q, X, or Z. So what I'm going to do here is pretty much identical to the twos. I would probably sort these alphabetically. I just find it to be the easiest, and I'm going to start by taking a read through this whole list. You'll notice a lot of the words are quite common, such as axe, box, fix, and fox. So similarly to the twos, I would recommend reading through the whole list and then maybe on a separate piece of paper or on a computer notepad, just jotting down all of the ones that you're not familiar with, and reading more carefully through that list maybe 1 or 2 more times. And once you feel fairly familiar with all of these words, then what you're going to do is create a quiz from this list. So one easy way to do that, if you don't want to have to rewrite out these search conditions, is to right-click any of these words and then hit Quiz from List and then OK. And this will create a quiz that contains all of the words in that list. So similarly to for the twos, I would go through this entire quiz. This word is going to be QAT, Q-A-T. Really, really useful word, by the way, since it's a Q without U word. And then sort of just keep going. This one you can see on the bottom left has 2 words, which are going to be Raj and Jar. And now if at any point I miss a word, so this one of course is locks, but let's say for whatever reason I'm not sure of it, or I don't get it, I'm going to mark it as missed, and it's going to show as blue. So later on, when I'm done with the quiz and I go to Analyze Quiz, I'll see all my missed words in blue up here. So when I want to review the missed words, I'm going to right-click and then hit Quiz from List again. And I'm going to sort of iteratively do this until I've gotten all the missed words at least once. So pretty much the same process we talked about with the twos. And once I've done that, what I do is go through the entire quiz again from scratch. And at that point, since I'd have answered all of the words correctly at least once, hopefully I'll miss very few, if any, of the words. So once you feel pretty solid on these threes, the next step I have is going through all of the threes. So the way I'm going to search for that is just getting rid of this consists of condition and hitting search, and you'll see that there are 1,073 words. So if we take out the 98 we just learned, that's still just about 1,000 more words that we have to go through. So that's obviously a big step up in size from the twos and the high point threes, of which there are each about 100. And basically, though, the process is going to be very similar. It's just going to be a little bit more time-consuming. So what I would do once again is sort these words alphabetically and just read through the whole list. You will see a lot of common words, but there are still going to be several hundred threes that you're probably not familiar with. And it's going to be very time-consuming to write out all the familiar ones on paper, so I wouldn't necessarily advise that here. If you feel up for it, then by all means go ahead. It certainly would be a useful exercise, but just given how many there are, I don't think it's necessarily worth it or the most efficient use of time. In this case, though, I would definitely still recommend reading through all of the 3-letter words. I think doing it alphabetically is perfectly fine here. With the longer words like the bingos, where you're studying them in chunks based on probability, I definitely don't recommend doing them alphabetically, since of course sometimes words that are first alphabetically are far from the most likely to actually appear on the board. But with the threes, you'll more or less be studying them all in one chunk, so I think doing them alphabetically makes total sense. It's just sort of the most intuitive, and it can also be helpful for recall, right? Like if you see 2 words after each other alphabetically, then it can help you remember whether anything else is valid. So like, for instance here, if I'm studying alphabetically, I see ABA and ABS. So if I can somehow remember that, then if somebody plays the word Abe, ABE against me, I'll think, wait a minute, it just went from ABBA to ABS alphabetically, and Abe would be in between that, and I don't remember seeing Abe there, so I know it's not a word, and I'm going to challenge. It can be really useful for that kind of thing to study these short words alphabetically, so that's what I recommend. And of course, it can be tough to read through all 1,000 of these words at one sitting, so what you can kind of do is break it up, right? Maybe print out this list, or if you're just scrolling through on ZEBU, like just read through all the A's, B's, and C's, or something like that at one sitting, then take a break, make sure you feel fairly familiar with those, and then start reading through the D's, and so on and so forth until you've read through the whole list and feel at least somewhat familiar with all of them. And then what you're going to do is the same exact thing as we did before. So you're going to create a new quiz. I'll just use this icon this time for all the threes. And just go through all of them like we've been doing. Now, this time you're probably not going to go through all of them at once since it's a longer quiz. So what you're going to want to do is hit this Save Quiz button down here in the middle, and then save the quiz as all the threes or some name you'll recognize, so that later on, if you want to come to it, you'll be able to go to this quiz icon and hit Load Quiz in the bottom left, which will pull up a window of all your saved quizzes, and then you can just select the threes quiz that you were working on, and it'll start you up from exactly where you left off. So here I'm going to do the exact same thing as I did on the last quiz. So here I see that there's two. It's going to be mum and and just keep going through. Once again, if I'm not sure of something, like let's say here I see there's two. I know sen is a word, but I'm not sure if it's ENS or NES. So like let's say I guess wrong. It's, if I guess NES and that's incorrect, then what it'll actually do, even if I get ENS correct after, if I type in anything that's incorrect, it'll automatically mark it as missed. And then once I'm done with the quiz, as before, I'll hit Analyze Quiz and then create a quiz from all the missed words and go through that recursively until I've gotten all of them at least once, and then go back to the beginning, do another quiz on all of the threes, and at that point, hopefully there will be very few, if any, missed threes. So that's what I would do, at least for the ZEBU portion. And then after this, I do strongly recommend doing the same thing on Aerolith. So once again, I'm going to open that here, and Aerolith does have the threes pre-saved. So if you go to Aerolith lists and then select the threes, then you can hit play and go through the threes in this format. And I just think with a list of words like the threes, that's short words and they're super important, it's just good to go through them in as many different formats as possible. So ZEBU and Aerolith are similar, but they are different formats. Just seeing all of them at once here and kind of having to scramble them as fast as you can, I think is a fun challenge, and that'll really improve the solidity of your knowledge of the threes. Since with the threes, it's just as important for yourself to know which are valid so you can make plays using those threes, but to also know which are not valid, so that A, if your opponent plays something that's not valid as a three, you can challenge it off and get a free turn, and B, so that you know if, say, you play a two-letter word, you are confident that it doesn't take certain tiles so that you know you don't have to worry about an opening. Those are both really, really useful, and it's super important to know not only which threes are valid, but also which threes are not valid. So just the multitude of different ways, more of that you can get, the better it'll be for building that knowledge. So here, as before, I'm just going to go through this wall of words. I won't go through the whole thing here, but like the first few are sev and wob. And I'm just going to go through all of these, and once I'm done, either if I clear the whole wall or if there's some that I miss, then I'm going to hit start again, and it'll take me now, you'll see here, it's going through questions 51 of 100. There are 761 different pairs of three letters that make a valid word, so this one will take a little bit while to go through, but if I don't finish it, what I can do similarly to ZEBU is hit autosave over here, and then it's going to save my progress, so if at any point I want to come back, I'll be able to start off exactly where I left off. And then again, just like ZEBU, once you get through all of these, then if you start the quiz again, you'll be able to go through all of your missed ones. So do that until you get all the missed ones correct. And I think once you've gone through this list multiple times on ZEBU and Aerolith, as well as the missed list, which hopefully will be getting smaller and smaller and eventually zero once you've gone through the threes a couple times, you should have a pretty good knowledge of the threes. And yeah, once you have the threes down, you'll already be well on your way to being a tournament Scrabble player who can compete pretty well in the intermediate divisions. And I think the next step for you to improve even further, as I mentioned earlier in the video, is going to be the four-letter words that are particularly useful. So that'll be the four-letter words with power tiles and the four-letter words with a lot of vowels. So the four-letter words with power tiles, it's basically going to be the same exact search as the threes, right? Except here I'm going to have 4 blanks for the anagram match for four-letter words, and then I'm once again going to do this consists of 1% and up with JQXZ, and you'll see that there are 284 words. So a bit more than the 98 or so three-letter words with a JQX or Z. But I think after doing the threes, which is a list of 1,000 words, this will feel a little bit less daunting, seeing only 284 words. And again, what I would do here is the same thing as we've been talking about, just sort these all, read through them alphabetically. If you feel like it, note down all the ones that you aren't familiar with, and then create a quiz based on these words. And I believe these words are also available in Aerolith. So let me go back to the main page over here. So load new word list. Here we go, JQXZ4s, perfect. So what you can do here is the same exact thing on Aerolith, just create a quiz from this JQXZ4s and go through it in the same fashion that we've been talking about. Now, the only thing that leaves us is the vowel-heavy fours, so the search for this is going to be a little bit different. What I find is easiest here is going to number of vowels. You could use the consists of as well, but this is super easy because the number of vowels feature is directly built into ZEBU. So just do minimum 3, maximum 3, hit search, and there are going to be 67 words in this list. So a pretty short list compared to the last few we've been looking at, but as usual, same process. Just sort through them. This list I do find tends to be a little bit more obscure. There aren't too many common words. There are some like acai, and aloe, and aqua, but there aren't a ton of common words here. So it's definitely worth reading through this list and getting a little bit familiar with it before you jump into the quizzes. But once you do that same process as usual, create the quiz, go through it, and then go through the missed words until you have gotten them all at least once, and then revisit the quiz. And if you feel like it too, I believe there's a way to get this on Aerolith. Here, I think it's not saved, but if you go to word search and then do word length 4 to 4 and then number of vowels as the same setting as ZEBU. So once again, you're just going to do 3 vowels and then hit play, and you'll get the same Aerolith word walls quiz that we've been talking about all along. And basically, you'll see, guys, with the future videos, it's more or less going to be this same technique of searching for the word list, reading through it, and then quizzing yourself. It'll just be a little bit more time-consuming for certain word lists, and just maybe a little bit more difficult as we get to the longer words. But overall, it's going to be the same process that we'll be seeing over and over. But yeah, I think that's it for this video. That now covers everything. We've now covered the 2s, the 3s, as well as some of the most useful 4s. So I think once you've gotten a solid grasp on all of the words in this video, you'll certainly be more than ready for your first Scrabble tournament, and I think you should be able to perform quite well in the beginner division, and probably even hold your own reasonably well in one of the intermediate divisions. And you're well on your way to rising the ranks quite quickly. But in the next video, we'll be starting to talk about studying bingos, which is really exciting since in the video on 2s, we talked about how the 2s are sort of the building blocks for the bingos and longer words. The 3s are similar in that way, and we'll finally be at the point where we get to start studying bingos in the next video, which should be a lot of fun. So thanks, guys, for watching this one, and I look forward to seeing you there very soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.